This panel is talking about planning for water and land use transitions. So my name is Nat Seavey. I'm a wildlife ecologist for Point Blue Conservation Science. We're based out of Petaluma. And for me, one of the real privileges of working on this project has been working with one of the other co-authors, Peter Moyle. And Peter Moyle is from UC Davis, and he literally wrote the book on the fishes of California. And so as a wildlife biologist, it was fantastic to have the time to spend with Peter and think about some of these topics. And I think when Peter and I started thinking about this stuff, we were thinking about water in the San Joaquin, we were thinking about aquatic ecosystems and rivers, and that story really evolved as we realized that really what we're talking about is a huge change in land use, and that a big part of this will be how we steward the lands through that change. So as we've discussed this morning, balancing groundwater, achieving sustainability could mean taking as much farmland out as 500,000 acres. And so that's a huge amount of land, and there's going to be some impacts on that. And it's important to try to do what we can to reduce those negative impacts. And that it means regional economies, it means thinking about air quality and the impacts that it will have to farmland neighboring areas that are fallowed. So one of the opportunities is to look toward how we can manage those lands for multiple benefits. And one of the things that's exciting is that there's already a lot of examples about how that can be done in the San Joaquin Valley. So we can think about how recharge basins can be managed in a way that can create waterfowl habitat and habitat for other wildlife. There's opportunities to restore retired land and provide habitat for San Joaquin desert species. There's new information about designing solar facilities in ways that makes them wildlife friendly. And we can restore floodplains in a way that also provides flood protections for people. So identifying ways that we can scale up these kinds of solutions, that could help the valley emerge as one of the leaders in providing multiple benefits for people and nature through their ecosystem management. So we've made a lot of recommendations about what would move the valley toward some of these solutions. Making recommendations and actually getting the work done on the ground are two very different things. And so we're fortunate to have 4 people up here who are fantastic at getting things done on the ground to talk to them about some of these recommendations. So I'd like to start by thanking our 4 panelists and giving you just a very quick introduction to each of them. So Bernard Jimenez is Assistant Director of the Fresno County Department of Public Works and Planning, where he oversees the county's land use, environmental, and water resources planning programs. Bernard represents Fresno County in a number of capacities, including groundwater sustainability agencies, the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, and the Water Agencies Coordination Groups. So Soapy Mulholland is President and CEO of Sequoia Riverlands Trust, a nonprofit land trust dedicated to strengthening California's heartland and the natural and agricultural legacy of the Southern Sierra Nevada and San Joaquin Valley. And Soapy has worked on California water policy issues since the 1980s. Vito Chiesa works in a family farming operation, and he is currently in his 3rd term as Stanislaus County Supervisor for District 2. Vito has served as the president of the Stanislaus County Farm Bureau and is the chairman of the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. And finally, John Ryder. John Ryder is the CEO of Maricopa Orchards, a leading almond, pistachio, and fresh produce grower. So John assumed this role in 2013 after having consulted for the company for a number of years on a variety of farming, banking, water, and solar development matters. Vito and Bernard, I'd like to start off with you. So both of you have extensive experience in county government and have been involved with water and land planning. So as we think about the land use transitions that will come with SGMA, how can counties foster broad-based participation and cooperation among various groups that need to work together to achieve the best outcomes?
Sure. So in terms of participation, I think I'll just reflect back on what Fresno County has done here locally. Back in 2015, just after the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, our board adopted a set of principles that were intended to be used as the basis for the various cooperative agreements and direction to staff. And the preparation of those principles was not done in a vacuum. We actually reached out and we worked with the two of the larger irrigation districts here locally, Fresno Irrigation District and Consolidated Irrigation District, along with the Kings River Conservation District. So it was kind of a coordinated effort, but it really set the stage for how Fresno County and its partner agencies would try to attempt to transition into the implementation of SGMA. So that's really what we've done, and that's what we use as a guide to implement SGMA. The cooperation aspect of it has been participation. We've been at the table since the very beginning, working with all the various stakeholders, the irrigation districts, and that's really been critical to, I think, get to the point where we're at today. A lot of effort was put into moving towards the creation of the various GSAs by 2017. All of the areas in Fresno County that are covered by the basins are covered by a GSA, including the white areas. And so Fresno County is party to basically every GSA in Fresno County, either by joint powers agreement or a memorandum of understanding.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I got to say how great this is just to hear that we're trying to get the ball moving, because this is a completely uncomfortable conversation. If you're in the agricultural industry, it's a sum game today, because we're not creating new water today. I'm talking about today, but there's great opportunities. So you got a devastating plan to the Central Valley, a really devastating plan, and an extremely devastating plan. But the truth is that we've been overdrafting. We make no mistake. Stanislaus County Water Advisory Committee, I'm sorry, I'm trying, we essentially have a moratorium on drilling wells in the white area. And the farmer on the board, really a popular guy, to say the least. Okay, so needless to say, we recognize the problem. Much like Fresno County, we've formed our GSAs. We are in the non-critical basin. We are in the high priority basin. The whole Central Valley, you saw some lighter orange. That's Stanislaus. We have Exchequer Dam. You've got Don Pedro, and you've got Stanislaus. You got fairly good water rights. So it's, again, even with all of that, we still have an overdraft problem in our county on the east side. I currently sit on two GSAs. One is the haves, as I call them, and one is the have-nots. But I will tell you, the ones that don't have water are much more progressive in their thinking. It is a joy to go to a meeting and try and figure out ways that we can do groundwater recharge. They've been collecting data a lot longer, and they have to. I know they have to, but they were doing it before they had to. So I think there's a real opportunity, and next I'll come around to how we can do it region-wide, or how I think we can.
Great. So let's see if we can get the microphone over here to John. John, so you're an agricultural producer, and you're also involved with renewable energy. So you kind of sit on the ground looking at these different policies evolving around you. So from that perspective, what kind of local policies, whether it's the GSAs, the counties, irrigation districts, what do you think is needed to encourage growers to make some smart decisions about water and land use as SGMA evolves?
Okay, thanks, Nat. And thank you, Ellen and PPIC, for the report and for hosting this event. It's a great turnout, so thank you very much. We farm primarily in Fresno and Kern counties, and primarily permanent crops. And we have dealt with volatility of surface supplies for a very long time. And so one of the ways that we have addressed this is to set aside land in our own operation. So we're planted in those critically overdrafted areas where we have volatility of supplies. We're only planted about 50%. A number of years ago, we looked at what are ways that we can utilize, or take that underutilized land and put it to a new economic use that is not reliant on water. We started in Kern County, where we have several thousand acres that are set aside just for the water rights. And I should say at that time it was just surface water rights. Now, as with the development of SGMA, we're looking at it being set aside for SGMA purposes as well. And we went ahead and we sourced transactions with solar developers at a very difficult time because the financial crisis hit, and some of those deals went sideways, at least for a time being. So we actually went out and sourced permits ourselves. And we took our ag land and we went to Kern County, we went to the federal government, and we went to the state government, and we obtained our permits. We have a conditional use permit from the county. We have federal and state incidental take permits, and we have a habitat conservation plan. Generally speaking, what we've done is we've created a master planned solar community or complex where different developers can come in and take a portion of the land, pre-permitted, and do what they do best, which is interconnection and sourcing power purchase agreements from the utilities. For us, long term, what that does is it allows us to take the surface water and the groundwater associated with the land that we're putting to use for solar purposes, and we're able to take that. We leave the water rights with the land, but we're able to take the supply that's derived from those rights and apply it to our planted acreage. And we're looking to do that in an environmentally conscious way. We're working actually with SOPI's organization on our conservation easements, and the idea is to have farming, renewable energy generation, and habitat conservation all working well together.
Thank you. So, SOPI, you're, as John mentioned, one of the Valley's leaders in habitat stewardship efforts. And a lot of those efforts are based on partnerships with private landowners, state agencies, and county government. So you're kind of working in between all of these people. So in that context, when you hear that up to 500,000 acres could be fallowed, what are some of the challenges that you see in terms of trying to manage those lands for beneficial outcomes?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for letting me participate, Ellen. I appreciate that a lot, and it's great to see so many faces that I've worked with over the years, so thank everybody for being here. I think one of the things that was most startling to me when I got involved with 5 SGMA groups was the concept of the different entities saying, well, I'll reserve or retire 5 acres here, and then there's 40 acres over here and 100 acres over here, and realizing that for an organization such as ours to help with that, it would be almost impossible, because I started looking at, okay, 5 acres, we'd have to fence it if we were going to get sheep. Who would want to put their sheep on there for 2 days? We don't have enough sheep to do that. And so the absolute chronic need to be looking at these 400,000 to 500,000 acres in large, huge blocks became really apparent. And so one of the things that I still think within some of the SGMAs that's missing is this idea of how are we going to do that? And I keep saying we need a World Bank. And I say that, and you can call it an ag bank or whatever, but there are really complicated issues that I don't hear about being talked about. I mean, just the real estate entities of trying to put all these parcels together to handle the escrows, handle the amounts of credits that the farmers are going to get back. The ability to then do something with those lands is really huge. So my first thing is, I'm hoping sooner rather than later we look at this need for this overarching group. And I've listened to the presentations on Australia and a lot of them, but this is California, and it's going to take a real level of sophistication. But after that, I think, is the need for management plans, and there's going to be some things that we haven't even looked at yet. So if we're going to retire lands, does it have to go back to natural settings, or could we, plant grains and other crops? This is decisions that we haven't made yet. But I think we have agencies that are out there wanting to make that. We have partnerships between various organizations that haven't worked together. So I think, as I've said before, there's solutions, but there are some big problems still to be faced.
So Vito, I'd like to follow that up. Sophie mentioned that there's this real challenge of how do we coordinate these small parcels that might be coming out. So, and we've already heard today that it's not just the land retirement, it's water quality issues and salinity issues, all of these stacked on top of each other. So when you think about those complexities, what do you see as the potential for regional planning to contribute toward a productive solution for that?
I think it's fairly easy on the basin, right? It seems like everyone's playing well together on a basin. Now we have to do the cross-basin collaboration, which becomes a little more challenging because you're crossing rivers, you're crossing water bodies, and then when you cross county lines, it becomes even more of a problem. I will tell you a couple of the regional bodies I sit on. One of them is the Partnership of the San Joaquin, California Partnership of the San Joaquin. It was started by Governor Schwarzenegger through executive order. We're trying to change that, but I sit on it with Dee Dee. I saw Brent Forehand in the back. I'm sure I'm missing someone, but Sarge is a participant. And so we have a real body of the 8 counties, and water is a main topic, transportation, broadband. I mean, there's air quality, the things you would think that cross all boundaries. But water is rising to the top, as you can see. And the problems never change from my perspective in 10 years. They just ramp up in intensity. Right now, water is the highest in intensity. But I think you have that one body, and then there we have the Regional Policy Council, which is made up of our councils of government. Used to be just a transportation agency, then they started talking about housing, and air quality comes with the housing component and the transportation component. But we have decided that water, again, is right at the top of our list. We spend a lot of time on making new water reservoirs, but we know in this room that it's going to take the suite of ideas in order to work. The fact that we can sit down and come up with priorities on Highway 99 or our SCS plans on air quality, in the end we come together and to a good solution. Water will be the same thing, as long as we broaden it to not just be about Temperance Flat or what's north of the Delta. Sites, there we go, sites. And so I think there's a real opportunity, and that's my job. I am not a water expert. I know a lot about water because I've farmed, but my district is different. This is opening up even a new world to myself.
Bernard, do you have anything to add to the challenges or the potential of regional planning, especially coordinating outside of those basins?
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo the comments from Supervisor here. There's been a lot of progress made, I think, locally, and obviously my experience is mostly with Fresno County, but just coming together with the water resource managers, coming together with the land use planners. Development of the GSPs has a requirement that there be consideration to the local land use general plans, and vice versa. The local agencies are supposed to consider the general plans in their long-term planning. So there's those discussions that are going on currently. I think the focus needs to be at the local level, at the local regional level, before it gets expanded beyond and encompass the 8 valley counties. But the potential is there. The issues that we're dealing with locally in Fresno County apply to Madera, to Kings, to Tulare, to Kern, to Merced. So there are commonalities there, and so I think the potential does exist. We talk about a soft landing approach, and what are we going to do with the fallowing of lands? There's a whole host of complications and issues that will result if we do realize those fallowing of lands, and it goes beyond land use planning. There are social issues, there's economic issues that would be realized, and so there's a number of things that we need to consider. The majority of the valley floor is under Williamson Act contract. What happens to those contracts? Because if you fallow the land, you're no longer eligible to be enrolled in there. And we talk about financial incentives to property owners. When the State Department of Conservation comes out with their new version of their important farmlands map, you may see the majority of the valley floor no longer prime farmland. So there's a host of implications to implementing SGMA beyond just the water resource arena that'll need to be considered. But I think the potential does exist for regional planning.
So John, Bernard raised a lot of challenges right there to the agricultural community. And so in the report, some of the items that we talk about are the need for funding, for technical support, and for regulatory flexibility in terms of thinking about how agricultural producers can respond creatively to these challenges. So can you speak a little bit to the importance of funding, technical support, and regulatory flexibility in terms of how you can address SGMA as a producer?
Sure. So when we look at fallowed grounds, I think we're going to have to put them to other use. And so land use regulations that are inflexible, I think, need to be addressed. So, for example, there are some water districts where if you convert your land into a non-irrigable use, solar project or a processor or any other use, you lose your water right associated with that. That's not, that's inconsistent with the idea of setting aside land so that we put it to other productive use and limit pumping. I think there's, when we look at, and I think Ellen touched on this earlier about transferring across the state. And what we face oftentimes is there are restrictions on where surface water can be transferred based upon the place of use, whether the water sourced from a state facility or a federal facility. And can we loosen those rules up such that water can be used as optimally as possible? I think that that's another area of flexibility. I think also if we're looking at the local level, the GSP or GSAs in their GSPs should be encouraging growers and other landowners to find ways to do groundwater recharge. And we talked about it on the prior panels, but I think a key thing is to say to growers programmatically in our basin or in our GSA area, this is, if you want to do recharge, here's how you do it. And teach the growers how best to go about it. Because if we look at all the various ways to, Eric Averett earlier today mentioned the big gulp, small sip concept. And if we are going to look at the most cost-effective ways to store water when that big gulp is available, groundwater storage is going to be among the top. The report demonstrates that, and we need to find ways for growers to be incentivized to recharge water.
Right. So, Sophie, you know, thinking about how some of these lands that are retired might be converted into other uses, I think your organization potentially has a role to play, and so I'd be curious to know. Based on your experience in the past with those types of projects, what does it take to really implement those on the ground, and what kind of partnerships and resources will it require?
Well, of course, it will require money, and that's one of the things that all the GSAs that I'm on are also looking at is where's the money going to come from this? It can't all come from the growers. So some of the ideas that were out there this morning were really interesting. I think that what you find is organizations such as the one I'm in are really interested in trying new things. And so it's the gumption to say, we will try new things and we will help the ag community by being a tool in their tool chest. We've worked with Sustainable Conservation, who's absolutely that same mission, which is to help farmers do what they do better. And that's one of the roles that we've taken on. So in order to do that, we're working on management plans in the Carrizo. We're working with 17,000 acres there to come up with plans on how do we restore that, how do we manage it. As I said before, do we manage it for natural native habitat, or can we adjust it to today's world? We're trying all those different plans. On one of our preserves that's in the Visalia area, we had a die-off due to drought of valley oaks. It is startling how many we lost. So we've been doing a management plan trying to work with different departments to figure out what do we do in situations like this, and can it be taken to a larger scale with our other areas that are experiencing death. So it's to really be willing to take chances and to try things, and then to be a tool to help people get there. And so we do it by doing management plans, by doing actual restoration projects, by monitoring, by working with other agencies such as Fish and Wildlife to come up with what works and what doesn't, and to be able to be flexible, and that word came up a lot today. I was happy to hear that.
Thanks. Great. So as other panels have done, I'd like to close with a lightning round and get your feedback on what's the one top priority that you see in terms of thinking about stewarding lands forward underneath SGMA. So Bernard, let me start with you.
I think from a, from a planning practitioner standpoint, the priority is going to be taking a look at Fresno County's general plan, its land use assumptions, and aligning those up with the GSPs that are currently being developed. There's a lot of land use assumptions that are going on in every city's and county's general plan that frankly needs to be checked against the GSPs that are soon to be developed. And they need to be brought into alignment. And I can tell you right now, they're generally not. So that's going to be a focus on the go forward, is to take a look at what we are doing as a county from a land use planning standpoint to make sure that there's no conflict. Because if there's conflict, then it creates confusion for the public, and that just leads to, you know, to mistrust and not understanding what who governs. So that's going to be our priority.
Vito?
I would agree with that, and I want to add on that the low-hanging fruit, right? This is a 20-year plan, and we cannot wait 20 years. I've heard that multiple times. Everything we do today alleviates how bad it is in the future. So maintaining all your stormwater in your county, in your municipality, in your basin is the easiest of all the things. It's not easy, but it's the easiest of trying to maintain. But as I go back to the zero-sum game, we have a surface water treatment plant in Modesto. About 45% of the county population has surface water. The rest of the county, the largest cities, are trying to do it. It's got a price tag that is unbelievable, $250 million, $250 million. We've got irrigation district that's staying side by side, trying to take care of the water quality issue. I think we can get there. It takes funding, and we're going to talk about funding over and over again, but we have to be realistic as not just an industry, but everyone in this room, because we represent lots of industries, about trying to find a funding source for all of this water quality, keeping storm water, and then I agree with you on the trying to align our general plan.
Sophie?
My priorities are for the not-for-profits in the area to continue working on tools and to try solutions out before anybody else tries it and is afraid to try it. Being brave and willing to do that. And then my other priority is to keep pushing for this idea that we really do need a vision of a land retirement program that makes sense for the state of California and isn't just the quick answer of I can retire X number of acres of my land, because I don't think in the long run that will serve us well.
I just go back to flexibility, and at every level, water district and landowner levels, we should have the ability to choose a path that works best for us in the subregion that we're in. We should be able to transfer water, create markets, both for surface and for groundwater, and be in a position to pursue what works best at a local level.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to now open it up to some questions from the audience. So, let's see. We've got somebody coming around with a mic here. We've got a question there.
Thank you. I'm not sure if, I hope some of the panel will have an opinion on this. Otherwise, I'd welcome to hear from Ellen or anybody else who knows. But would you deem that passing a law in California making groundwater use for recharge purposes a beneficial use? And if that's a good idea, what do we do about the potential opposition from large surface water users that are politically powerful?
Has to be done and is going to be done. It's just a matter of when. There's no way, or the money will be spent in trying to put in capacity improvements of other types, meaning reservoirs. And there's a lot of people that don't want on-stream, off-stream reservoirs. So I think that the groundwater recharge is, again, the the quickest thing we can do, whether it's true treatment, above ground injection, or whether we're just maintaining our surface water. But I have great confidence. We got a water board member here, and we got people in the administration, both federal and state, here at this meeting. So it's something I think we're all going to just continue pounding on until we get our way, like babies.
I would just add, it's a good question, Vernon. I think that we are going to go in that direction, but we do need to be careful that we don't set up a system or framework whereby it encourages folks to store groundwater for later sales as opposed to later beneficial use. Because I think that there's some concerns that some folks in certain regions may be in a position to hoard groundwater and then to later monetize that. And I think we just need to create a framework that strikes the right balance.
You have another question over here?
Thank you. It's been talked about in a roundabout way throughout this event, but it's a little alarming to me to be having a conversation about the future of water in California without climate change and the anticipated effects of climate change being front and center. And so my question is, and some of that anticipated effects are decreased snowpack and also increased evapotranspiration to where we're not going to be able to grow things with the same amount of water that we use today that in the future. And so how much of a priority are the anticipated effects of climate change into all of our planning and solutions? And when will we start talking about it openly?
Well, from a planning standpoint, climate change and things like greenhouse gas emissions and the like, those are all mandated to be addressed as part of the planning process. So you can't avoid it. Now, do we have an exact science and can we quantify exactly what will occur? No, we use the best science and the best information that's available to go forward with some of the planning assumptions. But I would say it's not being ignored, that it is being addressed in the respective planning processes, and it will need to continue to do that on the go forward.
I found that one of the things that's come front and center is that even though people don't want to talk about climate change, the fact that there are climate changes that are happening, whether or not it's due to man-made or not, that topic is now on the table. And so I think it is being addressed much more, even though we don't use that term as much.
We've got another question over here.
Yeah, Mr. Rayner. Mr. Rayner? Reiner? Right, John. Okay, John. So this will probably be the most dumbest question today, but I'll go ahead and be the sacrificial lamb that asks it. How does getting permitting and use permits protect your strategy for converting farmland to solar, and how does that fit in the conjunctive use model for the sustainability of groundwater? I don't see how you bridge that condition that's a requirement and a mandate under SGMA, that you have to be farming the land in order to have the neighbor-to-neighbor transfer or a neighbor-to-neighbor or conjunctive use within a basin. So how did you get past that, you and your legal eagles?
So that's not a dumb question at all. So I think at the core of our strategy is, while we are focused on permanent crops, we take great efforts to not overplant. And we've been doing this for 20 years. And so I could tell you in our planning sessions, when we decide as to what we're going to plant, every tree that goes into the ground, we're looking at where that water is going to come from, not next year or the year after, but 10 years down the line when the tree is fully mature. So our strategy is to say, okay, we are going to have open land in our portfolio. And again, so that we're not overplanted, we use the water associated with that open land to support the planted acreage. And what we're saying is, how do we take fallowed ground and put it to another use that has economic benefits and, frankly, environmental benefits for the state? And so we've been doing that for a number of years, and I think the idea of this panel was to say, SGMA is going to result in more fallowed acreage, and how can we take those underutilized assets and put them to good work? And so I think my comments today were to give an example of how you could do that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Come up here.
Bernard, you mentioned that we should really contend with a lot of these issues locally at first, and I agree there is a lot to deal with. But I'm curious if there's anything to be done to start the regional conversation so that down the road when we need to cooperate more broadly, you know, there is something in place. So if there is anything, what would you do?
So there are a number of forums where, for example, the local planners communicate at a regional level. There's a number of forums where the policymakers discuss things on a regional level, as the supervisor indicated. There's a number of forums in which water resource managers communicate at a regional level. I think our challenge or the opportunity is to converge those elements so that way there's cross-communication going on. You know, it's a process. There is nothing wrong with regional collaboration and communication. The structure doesn't exist today, but as we go about our business on a daily basis, water is rising to the top in terms of the topics of discussion. A few years ago, it was transportation, greenhouse gas emission reductions. Today, it's water. So there's a lot of commonality in terms of the issues that are being discussed. There doesn't exist a structure today to have that comprehensive discussion, but the opportunities and some of the structures are in place today. So I think we just got to build upon that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to like you to join me in thanking the panel today, and really appreciate everybody's time. Moss is a farmer and an author, and we appreciate him being here today.
Thank you very much. And again, on behalf of the PPIC board and staff, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's session. PPIC continues the engagement in the Valley in policy from Sacramento, but also how policy affects all of us in different ways throughout the state. I think the researchers at PPIC, they take their work personally. It's not just an abstract or distant topic, but their research reports are not destined for bookshelves and databases, but it's about real people, real community, and real lives. And of course, thanks for Fresno State and all the sponsors today, and especially all you participants, and especially Ellen, for the fantastic work. As an organic farmer, a writer, and someone who's active in the arts, I want to leave you with one thought. Water remains as an issue that demands complex and complete thinking. It's not just about linear thoughts and data analysis. It involves nature we can't control, and of course, human nature. It's personal, emotional policy that touches the lives, that impacts both economics and behavioral economics. It's the whole brain that I feel that's involved with water when you think of water in our valley. So I hope you could leave with one idea. You heard today discussions about policy and people, but I also want you to use your creative right side of the brain. And my request to you is for you and your people and your organizations, the folks you work with, is to try this highly creative approach when you think about water. This approach may help frame attitudes and your own personal commitment to the valley. It's about what song do you think when you think about water in the valley? At PPIC, I had them make a playlist of their different songs that they would have that reflected the research they do. And they came up with this list, and I wrote it in a column for both the Fresno and Sacramento Bees in January of 2018. So I want to leave you with this creative thought. What song reframes water for you and your organizations? And as one example from the playlist, it goes like this. Maria? and I hope it works. And for those of you who know that song, I'm only happy when it rains. All right, and I think it's a song that's real, appreciates all of us in the valley, and it changes our attitudes about it. But think about it, and I'm very much like that song. If I'm only happy when it rains, what am I when it's not raining? All right. Other songs on that playlist there was a Merle Haggard song called Kern River Blues that certainly fits the southern part of our valley. And another song that was thought of actually last year with the crisis in the Oroville Dam, and I'll expose this. It was Brilliant Ellen who thought of this Led Zeppelin song, When the Levee Breaks, on that. Again, this is the whole brain thinking about the crisis that we're facing here in the Valley. Again, it captures a perspective and theme and transplants some attitudes that we have that we could share publicly. So from that PPIC water playlist also comes another song. Maria? And of course, that song was Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. It was about a word of caution, I think, that you don't believe water problems will simply go away and not come back. We've had extreme years of drought. We have extreme years of weather, including snow in LA. They are part of this permanent climate change that we're having and undergoing. And again, that meaning of that song, Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls, is about people who chase intangible dreams with no thoughts of consequences. And finally, my own song that I would add to that playlist, and I'm an old guy, so it comes from an older generation of music, and it's a theme of water and research where water is not just a natural resource. It actually is an issue about scarcity. So therefore, it's always going to be political and troubled. And I think we in this room and those who work with water policy, where our voices can be the bridge that helps us look at water issues. So here's my list to this water playlist. Maria? So I think this, and those who are clapping, we're old, so we know that song, all right? I played that for my kids, and they go, "What is that song, Mom?" I said, well, only happy when it rains. You should be happy. I know that song. Anyway, but again, I want to bring this up because when we talk about water and policy, it's going to take the whole brain to solve it. It's going to take both the data and the research, but also the creative energies that are involved with communication. So as you go home, drive home, and when you meet with your folks, what's the water song that reflects your organization? And I think you'll find this broad spectrum of people at your work and people around you. And it might be a good way to introduce yourselves to each other so we understand what we're coming from and what kind of song that helps define who we are. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.